All right, now, as we've been doing, I'd like to start off again with playing a few rounds of two truths and a lie. I will give you three statements, and you decide which statement is the lie. All right. First one, which animals are among the top 10 fastest in the world? Which animals are among the top 10 fastest in the world? Number 1, peregrine falcon. Number 2, the wolf. Or number 3, the black marlin. Fish, okay? So, how many think it might be how many think the lie is number 1, the peregrine falcon? How many think the lie is number 2, the wolf? And how many think the lie is number 3, the black marlin? Okay. So the lie there is actually the wolf, which runs at about 30 to 37 miles per hour. The peregrine falcon has a dive speed of 185 miles per hour. And the black marlin has been clocked at 80 miles per hour. All right. Second one. Which of these are among the list for U.S. universities with the highest enrollment? U.S. universities with the highest enrollment. So which one of these is the lie? Number 1, Utah Valley University. Number 2, Texas A&M University. Or number 3, University of Colorado. So which of those three is the lie for highest enrollment? Okay. How many of you think it's Utah Valley University? How many of you think the lie is Texas A&M University? And how many of you think the lie is University of Colorado? Okay. The lie here is University of Colorado with 36,000 enrollment. Then we have Utah Valley, which is 41,000 and placed in the top 10. And then Texas A&M with 53,791 enrollment. All right, next, two truths and a lie. Guess the lie. Which of these are among the top 10 highest grossing films of all time? Top 10 highest grossing films of all time. Which is the lie? Is it Frozen 2? Is it Titanic? Or is it Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows? Okay, this is a little trickier because all these are familiar titles. All right, so which one did not make it in the top 10 highest grossing films of all time? How many of you think it's Frozen 2? All right, how many of you think it's Titanic? And how many of you think it's Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows? Okay. And the answer is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows only made $976 million. Frozen 2 made $1.4 billion, and Titanic made $2.1 billion. Chump change. All right, next one. Which of these fast food restaurants is in the top 10 list for most stores worldwide? So most stores all over the world. One of these is a lie. Is it 1, Taco Bell, 2, KFC, or 3, McDonald's? So which one is not in the list of fast food restaurants with the most stores worldwide? How many think it's Taco Bell? All right. How many think it's KFC? And how many think it is McDonald's? Smart move. All right. So obviously McDonald's has 18,000 stores all over the world. KFC has been upping their game, and they now have over 18,000 stores worldwide, and Taco Bell only has 7,000 stores worldwide. That was an interesting one. So KFC is going all over the world. All right, last one. According to Pequod's Pizza in Chicago, what are the top 3 most requested toppings on pizza? So one of these is not true. Top 3 most requested toppings on pizza. One of these is a lie. Is it pepperoni, mushrooms, or sausage? Okay, out of those, one of those is a lie for most requested toppings on a pizza. How many of us think it's pepperoni is the lie for not being one of the most requested? Okay. How many of us think mushrooms is the lie for not the most requested? And how many think sausage would be? All right. So the answer is actually sausage did not make the top 3, and mushrooms did. So there you go, Chicago. Pepperoni and mushrooms, and sausage was actually beaten out by extra cheese was the request for that. So that is what is popular in Chicago, to have a pepperoni, mushroom, and extra cheese pizza. All right. I was tempted to add pineapple in there, but everybody knows that pineapple doesn't go on pizza. So, just like in this example, there are some things in ethics that just should not be. That's what we're looking at today when we're talking about deontology. All right, so this is the book that I was telling you about, Life Work by Randy Harris. So again, excellent book to look at ethics in a way that is understandable and fun, giving you a lot of moral dilemmas and things to think about. So let me read from his book to give you a description of deontology. All right. So he says, let's consider a second major theory of ethics, what we call deontology. Now, this is another really impressive word. It comes from a Greek word that means duty. You have certain duties, certain things that you are required to do. And so let me give you a really easy definition of deontology. Some acts are right or wrong regardless of their consequences. Okay? So remember, in utilitarianism, we're looking at the consequence. The outcome outweighs the decision or the act itself. So whatever the outcome is, if it's good, then this is the decision we're making. In deontology, some things are right or wrong no matter what the outcome is. So what happened for most of you as you considered some of these moral dilemmas we talked about is at some points you were thinking like a utilitarian, and some points you're thinking like a deontologist. That's why some people are unwilling to torture. Remember the terrorist's son? The terrorist has a bomb on downtown Omaha and is going to kill 50,000 people and won't talk, and yet you find out they have a son. Do you torture the son to get information out of the father? Some of us were still not happy with saying, yes, we should in order to save all those people downtown, because for some of us, we're thinking that still does not feel right, regardless of the outcome. It doesn't feel right. It's because you decided in your mind that even though the consequences of not doing that are horrendous, there's something wrong with the act itself, which is, by the way, why you should have come to exactly the same conclusion in regard to the terrorist himself, because you can't have it both ways on that one. You've either got to torture them both or not at all. So anything else is absolutely inconsistent. If you're making your decisions on deontological grounds, it's equally wrong in both cases. And if you're making your decision on utilitarian grounds, it's equally justifiable in both cases because it produces the most good for the most people. So let's come into the real world. One of the most famous psychological experiments in the last 20th century is now referred to as the Milgram experiment. Stanley Milgram came up with a brilliant series of experiments. I'm going to set it up for you really quickly, and then there's a video on it if you ever wanted to look that up. Milgram was interested in what we have come to refer to as the Nazi Guard syndrome. One of the things that we're really bothered about is how perfectly good Christian people could do dreadful things simply because some authority figure told them to. So Milgram wondered if that was just a blip, or if we were all susceptible to that kind of pressure. So he created the following brilliant experiment. He's got a teacher with a learner, and they're sitting at a table with a partition in between. He then tells the learner that the experiment is about the effect of negative reinforcement on learning. That is, does punishment help people learn? All right? Now, all of you who are parents, teachers, coaches, you've made up your decision at some point in your life about that particular topic, right? Is it better to have positive reinforcement, or does negative reinforcement help people learn? All right. The experiment is set up so that the learner is given some information to learn, and every time the learner makes a mistake, the teacher pushes a button, which gives the learner a mild electric shock. The teacher has a console where every time the learner misses, he or she can give an increasingly stronger shock. Now, there's really only one subject in this experiment, and it's not the student, it's the teacher. The learner is an actor. The learner is sitting behind the petition and will do nothing but act. So Milgram is interested in how far the teacher will go. So they start the experiment. The learner gets most of them right for a while and then starts missing some, and then starts yelping at the shocks, and then starts complaining of a heart flutter, and then starts saying, "You're killing me," and then quits responding at all, which either means he's passed out or dead. The teacher, and this is all on film, by the way, is sweating bullets, becoming very distressed, and keeps looking over at the person in the lab coat who is sitting there and says, "I think he's had enough. I think we should stop the experiment." And the person in the lab coat keeps their face straight, never says anything, except this: "Teacher, please continue. We need to finish the experiment." Because they wanted to see how far people would go, and the fact of the matter is, most teachers never stopped shocking the students because the person in the lab coat kept saying, "Let's finish the experiment. Let's keep going." How far would people go just because an authoritarian figure tells them to keep going? That's an experiment in deontology. Is it right or wrong no matter what? Or is it right or wrong somebody tells you to do something? Is it right or wrong because you have an internal compass, or because you're listening to someone else? Now, I'm just wondering, we found out some really important information, but nobody was actually hurt. It was an experiment, but some of you may have been distressed by that. How many of you would say that that experiment seems unethical? Just the experiment itself seems unethical, all right? Now, how many of you would say, "Oh, that's okay. That might be okay to just have an experiment like that"? Because the way that you answer is largely determined by whether you're a utilitarian or a deontologist. If you're a deontologist, you say, "You don't treat people like that. You don't have the right to treat a person like a lab rat," which is essentially what we're doing here. If you're a utilitarian, you say, "Outcomes are important, and we discovered some very important information here, and nobody was really hurt, so it's not a big deal." Now, let's see if we can make it a little more complex. Most of you will be aware of the famous incident in one of the wars. I don't remember if it was Korea or World War II, but you have soldiers who are in great agonizing pain, and you have run out of morphine. And so what the doctors did was to say, "I'm going to give you some morphine, and this is really strong stuff, so I can't give you too much." But they actually give them nothing because they don't have any. Now, he's got nothing to give him, but he's going to lie as convincingly as he can, trying to convince the soldier that he's giving him morphine. And what was found is that the placebo effect is very profound. About 60% of the soldiers they treated with nothing got relief because they were sold the idea that they were getting morphine. So the doctors lied through their teeth, lied convincingly over and over, and even when they had to come back a second time, they would say, "Look, I can only give you a little bit more. This is strong stuff, and I don't want to kill you, so we're going to give you a little bit more." And they would do it again and again and again. That kind of lie. So how many of you would say, "That's right, that's all right, give the person some relief, let them have ease of mind"? Most of us, I expect, would say, "Help the person out." But the question we now have to ask is, are we utilitarians because of that choice? Do we just decide that outcomes are more important are the more important thing, or is there some other way to think about this? All right, so that in a nutshell is deontology. Deontology, again, is deciding that things are right or wrong no matter what the outcome. So what I want to do with the rest of our time this morning is ask, can we think of any biblical characters who decided that certain things were right and certain things were wrong no matter what the consequence? So think about that for a little bit. Can you think of anyone in the Bible who was not swayed, who said, I'm not going to do a certain thing because they had it in their mind that this is wrong no matter what the outcome? Anybody think of any examples for us?
Job.
Who? Job, very good. We're going to look at that one in just a second. Joseph. Yep. Daniel. Good. Jesus. All right. Ultimate example. So there's a good handful, right? When we start thinking, we can think there are some people that said, I'm standing my ground no matter what. I'm not moving on a certain thing. And what we have to decide is, do we have some of those types of morals in place as well? Are there some of those things where we say, this is not negotiable. In my book, this is wrong. Or are we more utilitarian? Well, it might be okay in certain situations. All right, let's turn to the book of Job. And let's take a look at the story of Job. All right. Job chapter 1. Let's start in verse 6. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, Where have you come from? Satan answered the Lord, From roaming through the earth and going back and forth in it. And the Lord said to Satan, Have you considered my servant Job? There's no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. Does Job fear God for nothing? Satan replied. Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You've blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, Very well then. Everything he has is in your hands, but on the man himself do not lay a finger. Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And one day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and carried them off. And they put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who's escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, The fire of God fell from the sky and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I'm the only one who's escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and carried them off. And they put the servants to the sword, and I'm the only one who's escaped to tell you. And while he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I'm the only one who's escaped to tell you. At this, Job got up and tore his robe, shaved his head, and then he fell to the ground to worship and said, Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. And all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. All right, so what is Satan trying to tempt out of Job, or trying to prompt out of him? To curse God. Yeah, to curse God. So I'm going to see what I can do to make someone curse God. These humans, they believe that there's this God that loves them and does everything for them and takes care of them, but let's see what we can do to sever that relationship. Let's see if I can make one of them curse God. Now, if you're Satan, what do you do in order to sever that relationship? in order to make someone, you know what, my goal is I want to hear this person say, I hate God. God makes me so mad, just disgusts me. How do you make that happen? So let's think a little bit like devils this morning. How do you do that? By the way, a great way to look at this is a book by C.S. Lewis called The Screwtape Letters. I tried to read it when I was in high school, and it was over my head. I came back to it at the end of college and slowed myself down and read through it, and it's actually very, very good for thinking about this exact topic. But how do you do this? What do you do to make people curse God?
Take something important from them.
Do what?
Take something that's important to them away.
Okay, take something that's important to them away. And we see that with Job at the beginning. It's like, well, he's got all of these streams of income, right? He's got all these animals that he ranches, right? And so let's take away something that's important. So let's take away something that's important to him, maybe like his income. So let's take away something that is an asset that helps him. What else?
Try to overwhelm him with bad things at one time, not just one bad thing that maybe he can handle, but try to just overwhelm him with more than he can really handle.
Okay, excellent. So we see the story of Job, and the story that what makes Job so compelling and hit home is that it keeps saying, one messenger came, and then what's the tagline? Wow. While he was still speaking, another one comes in and says, now this has happened. And while he was still speaking, another one comes in and this has happened. Usually we can get by with one or two bad things happening here or there, but let it rain down on us at all the same time. And what is our reaction? Are we going to curse God? Good. Other ways that we could make someone turn against God. What do you think?
Take away his family.
Take away their family, okay? Take away their family, or even take away their friends. You make someone feel isolated, right? So we're going to take away friends. We're going to say, and by the way, this is a huge one for our teenagers and our young people at church. Let's not let them form bonds together and be together. Let's isolate them. And when our young people sometimes come into church and don't feel a connection with other people, whether it be other teenagers or adults in a church, what's their reaction to church and to God? I never found the connection. Which there's good and bad for both, and I could go into all of those having done youth ministry for a while, because there's part of me that thinks, well, you need to be connected to God so that when your friends go, that's still there. But I do think there is something to be said in helping people find connection when they come in, because when you initially come in, you're looking for something to glue you to a belief or to a place or to a group of people. Okay, so all of those things might help someone if we're thinking of making someone curse God. Now, God's response, take his stuff but don't hurt him. And then we look at the rest of Job. We look at how Satan attacked Job. He took away his stuff. He took away his help. He took away his family. And that just wrecked him, just ruined him. Job chapter 2, we kind of look at it and we see that Satan kind of balks at God and says, yeah, God, but you knew that Job would not curse you if his things were taken away. But if I strike himself, in fact, if you look at the word there, let me strike his flesh. Let me take away his health. Let me go after the man himself and let's see what happens. And this is going to change his mind. And so you read Job chapter 2, and God says, all right, fine. Go after him. Let's see what happens. And then we see the rest of the book where the friends come, and they're trying to sit down and comfort him and say, in fact, his wife says the very first thing, says, just curse God and get it over with. That way he'll just strike you dead, you'll be done. But it said, the Bible keeps saying, in all of these things he did not sin by cursing God. For Job, there was one thing I am not going to do no matter what. And I'm not going to sit here and curse God. I'm not going to sever that relationship. I'm always going to count on him. It doesn't matter if bad things happen to me or not. I'm still with him. You will never, ever get me to say a bad thing about my God. That's some pretty strong faith. That's a pretty awesome deontological concept. I will never leave God, no matter what. Yes?
So that's interesting that Satan doesn't actually take his wife away from him. He leaves that one connection to family, yet that connection is not a healthy connection in this instance. She's telling him to go ahead and curse God and just die from it. Whereas in some instances, that one connection could be healthy, and in some of these instances, that one connection can be really unhealthy for your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You have good relationships and bad relationships. Some people might tell you a certain thing is good, some may not. Again, where is your internal compass? Are you deciding what is right and wrong? Are you letting others come into your life and decide? And this is, again, we talked about social media, week 1. Where social media is so bad is we can just go like and say, yes, oh, I'm so sorry about certain things, but not know the context, okay? Young people, oh, my parents, they grounded me. This is so dumb. Oh, I'm so sorry. They're so mean. Da, da, da. You don't know the context. What did they do? What happened? Why are they in trouble? But we can just like and comment without getting a context of something. And so are things right or wrong? How do you make that decision? All right, let's look. We're coming up to the end of class here. Let's look real quickly over at the story of Joseph in Genesis chapter 39. Genesis chapter 39. So we know the story of Joseph was sold into slavery, went to Egypt, and he became very well respected in Potiphar's house. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. He entrusted his care to everything that he owned to Joseph. All right? Now, starting in the end of verse 6. Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns is entrusted to my care. No one's greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. And when she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed, and when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. And we learn later that Potiphar came home, she told him the same story, and then our boy ends up in jail for a crime that he did not commit. Not only a crime that he did not commit, but something that he was actively refusing day after day. All right? Now we look at this story and we see a couple of different things. Again, when it comes to temptation, one of the ways we break people down is we keep hitting you over and over and over and over and over again. Come sleep with me. Come sleep with me. Come sleep with me. Oh, come on, it's not going to hurt anybody. Come sleep with me. Keeps happening day after day. And it gets worn down. But not for Joseph. Joseph says, no, this is something, no matter what, I am not going to do this. Now, another thing that you look at that'll make interesting recording, by the way, for class. Hopefully nobody comes in at that part. So if you came in at that part in the class, watch the whole thing. The other thing that's interesting is that there was no one in the house whenever he came in this specific time. It makes you wonder, did she clear everyone out of the house because she thought, well, there's other people and he's definitely not going to do anything where he thinks he might get caught. There's other people watching. So that's what's making him an upstanding citizen. But if I remove all the people and we are alone, again, isolate, then he sins. But even then, he says no. And I've read, I think it was Max Lucado did a study on this with young people, and he told them, if you're ever in a situation where you're alone with a girl in a car, just run away. That's what Joseph did. He ran. So again, here's a deontological example of someone that said, I am not going to sin no matter the outcome. This is wrong. So we have to think about what are some of the right and some of the wrong things about deontology. What are some negatives? Are there any negatives of deontology? Thinking these things are wrong no matter what. Can you think of any negatives? Any what ifs you can think about?
There's always a what if. Absolute situations are so rare that it's really hard. You can't say this never happens or this always happens, because there's always an exception.
Okay. So if you start thinking of the what ifs, it's hard to be consistent with this ethic, right? What if is it wrong to steal? What if I lose my job, I lose family, I'm nowhere near family, I have no other resources? Is it wrong to steal? So are we now utilitarians or are we now deontologists? Deontists, maybe it is. Which one are we going to abide by? So that's the bad thing when you think about deontism is it's hard to follow through sometimes with it, to say this is non-negotiable. What are the good things of deontism? Okay. 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 Yes.
I had to look around and make sure there were no little ears in here before I said this. It instantly made me think of his parents. Don't lie, don't lie, don't lie. Oh, the tooth fairy gave you money. Oh, Santa brought you this gift.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's just a little lie. It's not hurting anybody. Is that right? Or wrong? That's right. It's a magical childhood. They get to believe in something. Okay. Yeah, it's hard to be consistent with deontism, isn't it? However, what are there things that should be non-negotiable? Even when you think about God giving the Ten Commandments, and he comes down and he says, don't murder, don't kill. There are even times when we read in the Bible, though, where God gave a pass to people. Well, you've heard it said, don't divorce, but Abraham gave you the ability to have a certificate of divorce because you're so hard-hearted that you couldn't just stand it. So it's interesting, and I want us to really think about what is our system of ethics? Are we more about the outcome, or are there certain things that we say, this is right, this is wrong, no matter what, this is what I'm doing? Start looking in your Bibles and see what you see. You'll see it all, okay? And that's what I'm hoping to prove here too, is going through this study, is I want us to see that it's all there. And we'll be talking about moral relativism, we'll be talking about some other things coming up. But thank you for your comments today. Hopefully you're searching your Bibles and looking at your own mode of ethics and how you determine what's right and wrong. Thanks for your comments today.